Hello everyone, welcome back to Hit the Apex. I'm Charlie and today we have another video. This time we are reviewing round 2 of the 2023 season at the Jeddah Corniche Circuit for the 2023 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Before we get going, make sure to like, share and subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Look out there with the football channel, Hit the Apex the F1 channel and at MCFC Hibs on Twitter. Before we get going, in the last two reviews, pre-season testing and the Bahrain Grand Prix at the intro, I've accidentally said Dugout Daily instead of Hit the Apex. So make sure you check both of them channels out, and I do apologise for that. We will get going then, and we will start in practice 1, of course, where Verstappen heads Perez as Red Bull lead the way in first practice at Jeddah. Championship leader Max Verstappen set the fastest time of FP1 in Saudi Arabia ahead of his Red Bull teammate Sergio Perez, while Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso was third. Despite the heat will dissipate under the lights for FP2 qualifying and the race, Red Bull and Aston Martin began the season with respective drivers, Perez and Alonso donning soft tyres. The pair traded places at the top of the leaderboard for much of the first 30 minutes of FP1 before Verstappen equipped softs and eventually set the fastest time of 1 minute 29.617 seconds. Perez was 0.438 seconds behind his teammate in second. The Mexican driver has a new control electronics energy storing gearbox, but no penalty this weekend for him. Alonso was another 2 tenths away in P3 for Aston Martin, with his teammate Lance Stroll fourth and just under a second off the pace. Mercedes were next on the board with George Russell fifth and Lewis Hamilton sixth, both just over 1.1 seconds off the pace. Friday marks 10 years since Hamilton made his Mercedes debut. Here he remarked he was struggling for grip as he rounded the track on softs. Carlos Sainz, who has a new internal combustion engine for the race but no penalty, finished 7th ahead of Alpine's Pierre Gasly, Charles Leclerc 11th in the other Ferrari. Leclerc, who retired from the season opener, has a 10-place grid penalty in Saudi Arabia, having exceeded his allocation of control electronics. He will also have a new ICE and MGU-H for the Grand Prix. In 9th was Alex Albon for Williams, while Yuki Tsunoda rounded out the top 10 for AlphaTauri. Esteban Ocon took P12 for Alpine ahead of Nick de Vries in P13, while Oscar Piastri finished 14th for McLaren. Haas were 15th and 16th for Nico Hülkenberg ahead of Kevin Magnussen, while Logan Sargent was 17th for Williams. Then sat Alfa Romeo with Valtteri Bottas in 18th, 10 years after making his F1 Grand Prix debut, and Zhou Guanyu 19th. Lando Norris was 20th on the board for McLaren. This weekend, Norris has a new exhaust, MGU-H, MGU-K turbocharger, an internal combustion engine, but no penalties as he's not exceeded any allocations. Once since the beginning of 2022 as the FP1 pace setter won the Grand Prix, and that was when Verstappen claimed victory at the 2022 Canadian Grand Prix. Second practice begins at 8 p.m. local time at Jeddah, with Red Bull's reigning champion holding the cards. We will move to that session then, practice 2, where Verstappen leads Alonso at second practice session in Jeddah as track ramps up. Max Verstappen continued to set the pace in Jeddah as the Red Bull driver topped the timesheets in the second practice session for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, placing ahead of the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso and his teammate Sergio Perez. After the blazing hot opening practice hour on Friday afternoon, the drivers came out onto a much cooler track for FP2, with the sun having set and the floodlights turned on in what were much more representative conditions to those they will face in qualifying and in the race. And it was Verstappen who also topped the timesheets in FP1, who led the way in the customary FP2 qualifying simulation run, setting a time of 1 minute 29.603 seconds, with his nearest challenger Alonso 0.208 seconds behind. With last year's pole sitter Perez, he was third quickest, 0.299 seconds behind his teammate. It was a strong showing from Alpine on Friday, with Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly finishing 4th and 6th respectively in the session, with the Mercedes of George Russell sandwiched between the French pair in P5. Lance Stroll in the sister Aston Martin was 7th ahead of the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg and the Ferrari pair of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz in P9 and P10. With Leclerc set to take a 10-place grid penalty for Sunday's race, heard complaining of engine issues late in the session. Lewis Hamilton, who won the first race in Jeddah back in 2021, was 11th after having his first run on the soft tyres impeded by yellow flags, ahead of his compatriot Lando Norris in 12th for McLaren. Yuki Tsunoda was the quickest of the AlphaTauri drivers in 13th, ahead of the lead Williams of Alex Albon, the sister Haas of Kevin Magnussen, and the Alfa Romeo of Zhou Guanyu down in 16th. Tsunoda's teammate Nick De Vries finished the session down in 17th, ahead of his fellow rookies Logan Sargent and Oscar Piastri, who had to take avoiding action after nearly hitting the rear of Sainz, with Valtteri Bottas at the rear of the field for Alfa Romeo. The final practice session takes place on Saturday at 4:30 p.m. local time as the drivers get ready for qualifying and Sunday's Grand Prix. We will move to practice 3 then, where Verstappen fastest again to sweep every practice session before qualifying in Jeddah. Max Verstappen set the fastest time in FP3 to lead his Red Bull teammate Sergio Perez by over 6/10, and the rest of the field by nearly a second, as the championship leader swept all 3 practice sessions before qualifying in Saudi Arabia. Verstappen, who led FP1 and FP2 on Friday, followed that up with another table-topping performance on Saturday afternoon, having equipped softs to set a lap of 1 minute 28.485 seconds. The Dutchman improved steadily throughout the session, with the track gripping up from spent tyre rubber and temperatures decreasing towards sunset. Perez ended up 0.613 seconds off the pace in P2, while Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso was third on board, albeit 0.998 seconds off the pace of Verstappen. He was the last driver within a second of the Dutchman, as Lance Stroll was 1.024 seconds off the pace in P4. Lewis Hamilton rounded out the top 5 for Mercedes, whilst his teammate George Russell took P11. As for Ferrari, they left it late to set representative qualifying runs on soft tyres, with Charles Leclerc jumping to 6th and Carlos Sainz rounding out the top 10. Leclerc, however, has a 10-place grid penalty to contend with. McLaren was 7th and 8th on the timesheets, with Lando Norris just 0.008 seconds ahead of rookie teammate Oscar Piastri. Alpine's Pierre Gasly was 0.003 seconds behind Piastri in P9, ahead of Sainz and Russell. Zhou Guanyu finished 10th behind Russell as he took 12th for Alfa Romeo, while Nico Hülkenberg was next on the charts in P13 for Haas. Esteban Ocon took 14th for Alpine, and in 15th and 16th were the 2 Williams, with Alex Albon ahead of Logan Sargent. Kevin Magnussen took P17 for Haas ahead of Valtteri Bottas, and the AlphaTauris rounded out the timesheets with Yuki Tsunoda 19th on medium tyres and Nick De Vries 20th, having failed to set a time due to a power unit issue. Qualifying is next up at 8 p.m. local time, with Verstappen holding the cards as he seeks his first pole position in Saudi Arabia. We will move to qualifying then, where Perez stormed to pole for Saudi Arabian Grand Prix as Verstappen suffers dramatic Q2 exit. Sergio Perez claimed pole for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix during an action-packed qualifying session at the Jeddah Corniche Circuit after teammate and championship leader Max Verstappen dropped out in Q2 due to technical problems. Verstappen was the firm favourite for pole after leading the way in FP1, FP2 and FP3 and the opening Q1 phase of qualifying, but a drive shaft issue that struck in Q2 means he will start Sunday's race from 15th on the grid. Perez picked up the pieces in Verstappen's absence, posting a 1 minute 28.265 second lap in the decisive Q3 phase to claim a second successive pole in the kingdom, 0.11155 seconds ahead of Ferrari rival Charles Leclerc, who will lose 10 places due to an engine penalty. Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin therefore jump up to the front row as their strong start to the season continues, followed by the lead Mercedes of George Russell, Ferrari's Carlos Sainz and teammate Lance Stroll. A much stronger qualifying performance from Alpine saw them place 7th and 10th with Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly respectively, with Lewis Hamilton taking 8th in his Mercedes and rookie Oscar Piastri impressing en route to P9 in his McLaren. Haas and Alfa Romeo were unable to make it over the second qualifying hurdle, with Nico Hulkenberg ending up 11th from Zhou Guanyu, Kevin Magnussen and Valtteri Bottas as Verstappen completed the list of drivers to drop out in Q2 amid his costly issues. AlphaTauri lost both of their cars in Q1, with Yuki Tsunoda and Nick De Vries taking P16 and P18 respectively, the latter ruining a mistake at the final corner of his final lap after missing FP3 due to a power unit change. Alex Albon was the lead Williams in 17, splitting up the two AlphaTauris, while Lando Norris was the biggest name to drop out in Q1 after hitting the turn 27 wall and picking up steering damage that couldn't be fixed. It was a messy second F1 qualifying session for Logan Sargeant, who lost his first lap for exceeding track limits, spun out during his second effort, and finally encountered a technical problem on his final attempt, leaving him at the back of the grid without a time. So as it happened then, in Q1, Verstappen and Red Bull set the early pace. As the action got going in Q1, there was some early drama when De Vries' car snapped away from him under braking for turn 1 on his opening lap, ruining a set of soft tyres and adding to the Dutchman's woes after his lost practice running. It was a much smoother start for fellow countryman Verstappen, who immediately stated his intentions by clocking a rapid 1 minute 28.761 second lap during his first run, putting him in P1 by exactly half a second over his sister Red Bull of Perez. After De Vries' wild spin, there were similar problems for Norris, who clipped the wall at the final corner and reported steering damage, and Alonso, who lit up the race, exiting the first chicane and did a 360, forcing him to back out and go again. Moments later, Sargeant had the biggest moment of Q1 when he spun at the high-speed turn 22-23 and stopped perilously close to the barriers, leaving him in a rush to post the lap time after also losing his first effort due to track limits. As the second phase of runs played out amid sporadic yellow flags, Red Bull maintained their 1-2 position ahead of the Aston Martin's, Ferraris, Hulkenberg's Haas, and the two Mercedes, who was split by Zhou's Alfa Romeo. McLaren experienced mixed fortunes in Q1 as rookie Piastri placed 11th and made it through to Q2, placing ahead of Ocon, Magnussen, Gasly and Bottas, but teammate Norris fell at the first hurdle due to an aforementioned incident. As expected from their Friday practice form, AlphaTauri lost both cars in their first phase, Tsunoda placing 16th and De Vries dropping out in 18th after a messy end to his final lap, with a Williams of Albon slotting between them. Norris wound up 19th after his Q1 drama, with Sargeant bringing up the rear, the only driver without a time after his deleted lap and spin were followed by an abandoned final attempt when the American reported that something's broken. So, knocked out in Q1 then was Tsunoda, Albon, De Vries, Norris and Sargeant. In Q2 then, there was huge drama as Verstappen's Jeddah pole hopes are dashed. When the green light switched back on at the end of the pit lane for the start of Q2, it was Alonso who made the first move and stormed to the top of the timesheets with a 1 minute 28.757 second lap, marginally quicker than the time posted by Q1 pace setter Verstappen. Then, just as Verstappen was winding up his first run, disaster struck for the reigning world champion, who shortly after surviving a big moment through the first sector, reported an engine problem over the radio. Verstappen limped back to the pits in a bid to rescue the situation, but with only half a dozen minutes on the clock, there was little his mechanics could do, meaning he hopped out of the cockpit and out in Q2, down in 15th. Amid a flurry of late runs, Perez took over at the top with a 1 minute 28.635 second lap, moving just over a tenth clear of Alonso, followed by the Ferraris, the other Aston Martin, Stroll and Mercedes pair Russell and Hamilton, separated by Ocon's Alpine. Piastri and Gasly were the other two drivers to progress to Q3, meaning the two Alfa Romeos are showing Bottas and two Haases of Hulkenberg and Magnussen joined the frustrated Verstappen as Q2 eliminees. So knocked out in Q2 was Hulkenberg, Stroll, Magnussen, Bottas and Verstappen. And in Q3, Perez makes it 2 poles from 2 in Jeddah. When the pole position shootout began without expected favourite Verstappen, the opening phase of runs were topped by Perez, who clocked a 1 minute 28.265 second lap aboard his RB19, half a second clear of Leclerc's Ferrari, Russell's Mercedes and Alonso's Aston Martin. There was a close call as the various run plans converged, with Sainz encountering Russell at the pit exit and losing some momentum, but the pair managed to avoid contact and the 10 drivers involved in Q3 were all able to make it to the checkered flag. Leclerc was one of the big improvements on his second run to pip Alonso into P2, albeit with the side note that he will drop 10 places due to his pre-weekend engine change. But nobody could challenge Perez, meaning he was able to abandon his final lap. Alonso placed third with another strong outing in his Aston Martin, but will be the first beneficiary of Leclerc's drop from P2 to P12, joining Perez on the front row and setting up a tantalising run down to turn 1 on Sunday. Russell was next up in fourth, ahead of Sainz, Stroll, Ocon and teammate Hamilton, with Piastri and Gasly rounding up the top 10, all of them gaining a spot on the grid when Leclerc's penalty kicked in. So Sergio Perez said it was tricky, that Q3, especially not getting that second lap. That first Q3 run was quite good. It was quite clean, really clean. Nailing that lap, you really feel the Formula One cars coming alive in this place, and just maximising that lap was very important, because with the issue we had in the final run, it was really important as the track was improving. It's a shame about Verstappen's stoppage. Max has been really strong the whole weekend, and hopefully tomorrow we can have both cars up there. You never know with these cars, reliability issues can hit you at any time. That's what Sergio Perez said. The 2023 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix will begin at 8 p.m. local time on Sunday night. Verstappen leads the championship after his victory at the Bahrain season opener, but will he leave Jeddah with that advantage intact? We will move to the race then, where Perez fends off Verstappen to win action-packed Saudi Arabian Grand Prix as Alonso takes his 100th podium. Sergio Perez converted pole position into victory at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix as teammate Max Verstappen recovered from P15 to make it successive 1-2 finishes for Red Bull. Fernando Alonso put his Aston Martin on the podium again with a fine drive before being stripped to P3 and then having it reinstated after a steward's review. Perez overcame an attack from Alonso at the start, a nervy safety car period, and Verstappen's charge from the midfield to make up for the potential win he lost at the Jeddah Corniche Circuit a year ago, kick-starting his 2023 championship hopes in the process. Verstappen progressed to P2 in rapid time for ultimately had to accept defeat to Perez, with the reigning world champion managing additional driveshaft concerns late in the race after the same component failed during qualifying. Alonso impressively took the lead from Perez into turn 1, but a subsequent time penalty for lining up outside his grid box, coupled with the relentless pace of the Red Bulls, meant he had to settle for third. Alonso's rear jack mechanic was later judged to have touched the car before his penalty had been served, the Spaniard receiving a further 10-second penalty after the race that dropped into P4. Upon reviewing the decision, however, the stewards ruled that Alonso's P3 would stand, reversing the call and pushing Mercedes George Russell back to P4. Alonso became just the 6th driver to earn 100 F1 podiums. Mercedes and Ferrari had no answers for Red Bull's pace, and they distantly followed in 2x2 formation. Russell getting the better of teammate Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz leading Charles Leclerc home. Leclerc was also tasked with a race day recovery after his pre-race grid penalty, but 7th represented a much smaller reward than Verstappen's 2nd, and the Monegasque could not contain his frustration over the radio. Alpine enjoyed a much stronger second round as Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly collected points in P8 and P9, while Haas's Kevin Magnussen and AlphaTauri's Yuki Tsunoda went wheel to wheel over the final point, the Dane coming out on top with a late move. Nico Hulkenberg took 12th in the sister Haas as the Alfa Romeo Zhou Guanyu beat rookie drivers Nick de Vries in the AlphaTauri, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren and Logan Sargent in the Williams to P13. McLaren endured another tough day at the office after early front wing changes from Piastri, who clashed with Gasly at the start, and Lando Norris, who hit the debris, consigned them to two evenings towards the back of the pack. Piastri ultimately crossed the line in P15 after clearing Sargent on the final lap, something Norris narrowly avoided repeating as he settled for 17th, with Valtteri Bottas the last of the finishers amid apparent technical trouble in his Alfa Romeo. Alex Albon and Lance Stroll were the two retirements from the race, Albon encountering terminal brake problems aboard his Williams and Stroll being told to stop his Aston Martin in the early stages, taking him out of the front-running battle. Attention now turns to the third round of the 2023 F1 season in Australia, with Verstappen holding the championship lead over Perez by a point thanks to him clocking the fastest lap of the race in the dying moments. A dramatic qualifying session set up an intriguing grid for Sunday's race under the lights as pole position favourite Max Verstappen dropped out in Q2 due to a drive shaft failure, meaning the Dutchman would need to charge his way through the field in his repaired RB19. There was some further drama when he left the pit lane to take up his P15 grid slot, with brake fluid leaking into the cockpit, but mechanics were quick to make adjustments and Verstappen set about trying to emulate his recovery from 14th to victory at Spa-Francorchamps last season. Another driver out of place was Leclerc, who fell from P2 to P12 on the grid amid further power unit changes at Ferrari, meaning not one but two drivers lining up well outside the position and an already tantalising pre-race dynamic being given another exciting layer. When the grid formed up and the lights went out, with most drivers opting for medium tyres, Alonso sent the crowd wild as he bolted off the line to snatch the lead from Perez at turn 1, with Russell slotting into P3 ahead of Stroll and Sainz. However, just moments later, an incident involving Alonso, specifically an incorrect starting location, was noted by the stewards, and a 5-second penalty went the Aston Martin driver's way, as replay showed him stopping to the left of the grid box. With news of the sanction, While news of the sanction came through, Alonso had his mirrors full of Perez's Red Bull, and as soon as the DRS overtaking aid was activated, Perez reclaimed the position down the main straight, surviving a lock-up on the braking for the first corner. Behind, there was double drama for McLaren as both their drivers pitted for front wing changes. Piastri having damaged his in contact with Gasly in the squeeze at the exit of the first chicane, and Norris damaging his when he ran over the debris. As for Leclerc and Verstappen, the pair had climbed to P9 and P11 respectively by lap 5 of 50, with the Ferrari driver's bold choice of soft starting tyres working particularly well as he picked off a train of slower cars ahead. Leclerc faced a tougher challenge when he reached the back of Hamilton's Mercedes. That meant the order on P10 was as follows: Perez from Alonso, who had brushed off his penalty and was doing his best to cling on to the back of the lead RB19, followed by Russell, Stroll, Sainz, Ocon, Leclerc, Hamilton, Gasly and Verstappen. Having jumped the first hurdle of braking into the points, Verstappen clearly cleared Gasly to make it P9, before giving us brief moments on his Titanic scrap with Hamilton here in 2021 to climb to P8, albeit this time without any drama to report. Joe Hulkenberg and Bottas kicked off the pit stop action on lap 12, with Stroll the first on the front runners to box 2 laps later, but Perez, Alonso, Russell, Sainz and soft-shod Leclerc all extended their opening stints. The strategic move officially initially paid off for Ferrari when Sainz pitted on lap 16 and Leclerc a lap later, with both drivers getting to jump on Stroll as he rejoined the action. The Canadian's evening then ended dramatically when he was told to stop his car on track. But after a virtual safety car, the full safety car was deployed, bringing the rest of the front runners into the pit lane, where Red Bull and Mercedes carried out double-stack stops to ensure neither of their respective drivers were compromised, luring Leclerc and Sainz at losing out. As the cars filtered back out on track, Perez held P1 from Alonso and Russell, avoiding his safety car nightmare from last year, while Verstappen emerged in P4 as the big winner, completing a cheap stop after his overtaking filled first stint. Ferrari duo Sainz and Leclerc now had the Mercedes of Hamilton between them as Tsunoda and Nubber to benefit from the turning of the safety car. Ocon and Gasly rounded out the points-paying positions. Most of the field switched to hard tyres for a near 30-lap run to the checkered flag, aside from Hamilton, Sargent, Joe, Bottas and Norris, who were in. Sargent in P15, Joe P17, Bottas P18 and Norris P19, who had all taken on a set of the medium tyres. When the safety car peeled in on lap 21, Perez mastered to restart to hold P1 and lead the way, with the rest of the top 10 also initially holding position, despite some close racing between Ocon and Gasly through the first chicane. 1 lap later, Hamilton made a move on Sainz for P5 by getting in the slipstream down the main straight and capitalising on a compromised exit from turn 1 for the Spaniard, while the other Mercedes of Russell came under attack from Verstappen. When DRS kicked in again, Russell had no hope as Verstappen hit the bottom and breezed past on the run to the final corner, meaning he was now into the podium positions behind Alonso, who had just radioed to say, "I like this tyre," and leader Perez. Verstappen almost repeated the trick on Alonso a lap later, but this time waited until the main straight to jump up to P2, with all eyes now on the Red Bull pit wall and how they would manage their two cars converging up front. In clean air, Verstappen duly pumped in a new fastest lap, some half a second quicker than Perez, slashing the gap between them to 5.4 seconds, as Alonso drifted away in third and waited to pounce on any potential drama. Further back, Albon issued an alarming radio message as he reported a brake failure, forcing him to dramatically cut his speed and cruise back to the Williams garage, where he would join Stroll on the list of retirements. Before a potential Red Bull run-in, the Mercedes drivers embarked on their own intra-team battle for P4, with Hamilton and his medium tyres proving quicker than the combination of Russell and his set. Russell radioed Mercedes to suggest that he and Hamilton should avoid fighting over position, pointing to Alonso's 5-second penalty, and when his race engineer informed him that it had already been served, he replied, again info I need. In the meantime, Perez found another level of pace to respond to Verstappen's charge and stabilised the lead gap at just over 5 seconds, with a similar margin back to Alonso in third, followed by the Mercedes cars, the Ferraris and the Alpines. Stuck in seventh and with a podium well out of sight, Leclerc lit up the airways to express his frustration at Ferrari's lack of pace, declaring, "Being behind like this is really shit. I don't know what to do." There were some late worries for Verstappen as he reported an unusual feeling from the drive shaft, then made clear that something is wrong, while Perez expressed his own concerns about a long brake pedal. The scares were nothing more than that, however, as Perez and Verstappen traded fastest lap times amid some confused radio messages from the Mexican about whether they were both still pushing, made it to the flag and backed up their performance as the season opener with another 1-2 result as Alonso joined them on the podium again in his Aston Martin. However, Alonso and Aston Martin were investigated post-race for serving their penalty incorrectly due to the rear jack mechanic, who started his work too early, resulting in a 10-second time addition and dropping them from P3 to P4, briefly promoting Russell to the podium as a result. But following a right of review from Aston Martin, the stewards would reverse their decision, meaning that after a 10-year wait for a rostrum appearance, Alonso appeared on consecutive podiums. He also became just the sixth driver behind Hamilton, Michael Schumacher, Sebastian Vettel, Alan Prost and Kimi Räikkönen to take 100 podiums in F1 history. With Russell back to P4, Hamilton fifth, ahead of the Ferraris of Sainz and Leclerc, while Ocon, Gasly and Magnussen completed the paying position. The latter grabbing his reward with a DRS-assisted move on Tsunoda on lap 47. Hulkenberg, Zhou de Vries, Piastri, Sargent and Norris followed in a close midfield group, with Bottas lapped 18th and the last of the finishers after a late extra pit stop, as Albon and Stroll watched from the sidelines thanks to their earlier technical issues. So Sergio Perez after the race said, it turned out to be tougher than expected. That safety car, we really did a job in that first stint, but that safety car again tried to take the victory from us in Jeddah, but not this time. I was owed the victory last year, so finally I got it, said race winner Perez. The team did a fantastic job. The job they've done, they've worked so hard during the week. We've had a lot of mechanical issues, and these guys have been on top of that. I'm really happy for them. And it's time to celebrate. Verstappen now leads the drivers' standings on 44 points, one clear of Perez after pipping him to the fastest lap bonus during the final tour in Jeddah, and 14 points ahead of Alonso, while Red Bull topped the Constructors' battle by 49 points from Aston Martin and Mercedes. The next stop from the 2023 F1 calendar will be Oceania on the Australian Grand Prix, which takes place from March 31st to April the 2nd. So that is it for this video then. Everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Look out there the football channel, hit the Apex the F1 channel, and at MCFC Hibs on Twitter. Everybody, thank you all so much for watching, and we'll speak to you all soon. Take care.